As investors, they want to make a safe investment with a high return. Obviously, that is what investment is all about. But investors have realized that unethical behavior by companies put their investment at risk. And therefore, when they screen the performance of companies, they don't only look at their financial performance, they also look at their reputation, at their governance, at their ethics, because these things give them the confidence that the investment is safe. One needs to make sure that you have good apples in your organization. You don't want to attract people with a record of fraud and corruption and unethical behavior in your organization. So therefore it is very important that when you select people, you select the right people, the right apples, the good apples to come into your organization. And if we realize that ethics is of strategic importance to the organization, it is vitally important that we take active measures to build ethics into the organization, to make it part of the organizational DNA, part of the culture of the organization, of the way we do things here, even when nobody is looking.
And the idea behind Giotto and also the minor scales of Orpheus was that we would use a different model from the classical one of Galen, which is the medical model, but one which was based in Western history, if you like, the idea that people evolve a personality on the basis of their ability to control their animal instincts and to develop more mature ways of dealing with things. An interesting thing about this idea is that people are made responsible for their actions, because if you're an angry person, you don't learn to control your anger as a child, you'll grow up into an angry person as an adult. But you are responsible for that. That we could then apply this in work settings, it would relate to the sort of things which people hadn't controlled, ability to turn up at work on time, if you like, ability to pay attention to detail, ability to control one's pride, to control one's anger, sort of things actually that employers might be interested in people. In terms of Giotto, we actually approached it in a different way than in Orpheus, because we used what's called an ipsative approach. In a normative test, you just ask a question, and people can say yes or no, or strongly agree or strongly disagree. An ipsative test is one where you actually get people to compare one characteristic with another. So you don't say, are you intelligent, or are you hardworking? You say, could you more accurately be described as intelligent or hardworking? So you match the two traits against each other, and you have equally desirable or equally undesirable ones, and they have to make a choice between them. Now, you'll usually find that where people do have vices, if you want to call them that, they're the ones which they have, they don't see as badly as the ones which they don't have. So you'll usually find, if you ask a lot of questions for this particular type, that a pattern of responses will emerge, which tells you actually which ones they see as appropriate to them and which ones don't. And it's not easy to lie like that, because there isn't really an obvious right answer in the way there is to a normative question. It seems to me Skinner said that psychology was about a prediction and control, and one of the things we use to predict and control behaviour is actually know what people's ethics standards are. You're actually able to predict and control someone's behaviour much better if you know what their ethical personality is than if you're just told their straight big 5 personality characteristics. So it seems to be perfect science, in fact, to bring in ethical and even religious values, if you like, into the prediction process.
When the Giotto was introduced in South Africa by Christine Botha, who is the MD of Giotto South Africa, one of the issues concerned the validity of this particular test for integrity in the South African context. Now, Christine had arranged for the author of the test, John Rust, to ensure with the South African sample that the reliability coefficients were right. I was brought on board to look at validity. The way in which I did validity was by making use of a sample of people who had been found guilty in court for economic crimes, essentially fraud, and a matching group of people in the street. We were able to have an accuracy of discrimination between person on the street data and data of people who had been in prison with an accuracy of 94%. Now, that is absolutely huge. On the basis of the research results, we were able to develop a prediction model where, making use of the discriminant function, we would test a person on the Giotto, and having the scores, we would apply the prediction formula to determine how much of a risk that would-be employee is.
Christine asked me to do this on her behalf, just to quickly run you through the interpretations of the 7 scales. Firstly, we have prudence. Prudence is your care for detail, being able to focus and being accurate, and also enjoying maybe repetition. If you're low on prudence and you need to do repetitive work, you might see some negligence coming in there. On the other side, if you're a neurosurgeon, you need a high level of prudence because you need to be absolutely focused on what you're doing. And if you're doing every day a very clinical procedure, you need to do it exactly the same as air traffic controller. There's no room for experimenting or trying something new or a trial and error approach and those kind of job settings, where low prudence might suit an entrepreneur, where his trial and error approach he's learning from. Next up, we have fortitude. Well, fortitude is a work ethic. It's a belief in hard work versus work-life balance. If you've got high fortitude, you would go that extra mile. Low fortitude, though, it's not that you're lazy, you just enjoy prioritizing and balancing your life with your work. You're maybe not a corporate animal, maybe not that interested in climbing the corporate ladder, you're maybe not as ambitious, and maybe not that competitive, as opposed to the high side of fortitude. Then we have temperance. Now, temperance is your ability to control your emotions. With a high temperance, you're very accepting of other people's point of view, you're possibly a good listener, a team player. On the low side, though, you're assertive and forceful and might be aggressive in solving disputes. One of the key scales is justice. Now, justice is a sense of fairness, a rational approach versus an emotional approach. So let's say you're passed up for promotion. An emotional approach would be grudging towards your employer and would feel the world is unfair, and this grudging could be to the detriment of yourself, but also to the company, could lead to all kinds of other unethical behaviors. Whereas if you've got a high sense of justice and fairness, your ability to look rationally at things or take responsibility for your actions is such a vital asset to have for any employer in an employee. Next up comes faith. Now, faith is the loyalty to oneself or to others or the organization. And with a high faith, you're much easier accepting authority, you're following rules, and one of those great followers, where if you're on a low faith, you're maybe a bit more of a leader. You want to think of your own beliefs and serve those above maybe the company's. Then after faith is charity. Now, charity is transparency, your openness, and your ability to share from yourself, share resources, as opposed to maybe being a bit more crafty. If you're on the low side on the charity scale, you like to play with the cards close to your chest, believing maybe a bit more cynical that other people might be stealing your ideas, and you're not so trusting of others. Now again, in a company environment where you want to instill an openness and transparency and a trust and sharing of resources, you got to look at that charity scale of the candidate. Lastly, there's hope. Now hope is your future orientation. It is that ability to accept change, maybe even initiate change if it's linked with a high fortitude. Somebody on the very high side who likes rapid change all the time might also be a bit disruptive or distracting when they're constantly trying to implement changes. But you will find those are your innovators, creatives, and a lot of energy and drive with high hope. Again, beautiful aspects that you want to measure and link up when you're assessing a person for integrity. Now, the reason why they all fit together is, for instance, if a person has low faith, they're loyal to themselves, and they're low charity. For instance, they've got ability to cover up, they're playing secretively, they're private. Then in a justice, for instance, their judgment ability is not the best. They've been passed up for promotion, so they believe that it's their right to also get back at the company, that grudging behavior. So if quickly you see where you score low on those three, you become a very high risk for theft or fraudulent behavior or just disruptive behavior. And that's why when you go to Christine for the full training, you'll really enjoy mixing and matching these and looking how they work in a bigger picture.
I thought of sharing a few ideas with you around how we've been using the Giotto instrument integrity test in the assessment of leadership potential. There are different models that guide one in assessing leadership potential. A basic one that I can talk about would be to look at the person's aspirations, their abilities, and their engagement. Their aspiration, which refers to their needs to advance, to go forward in the organization, to get recognition and more influence. The ability part, of course, then gives us an idea of their mental cognitive ability, but also their ability to work with people, their interpersonal skills, those kinds of abilities. For example, charity. Because charity gives us an idea of the openness and honesty and transparency of the person, which is important in interpersonal relationships. I think it's a basis of any interpersonal relationship, because if you can show that behavior, you tend to create trust in other people. And then thirdly, the engagement part is how involved or committed am I in the organization. So looking at the Giotto, quite often we look at faith, which gives us an idea of loyalty, the person's loyalty. They are not just in the organization for their self-interest, which is the opposite, or the low score on faith. But we also use it to assess discretionary effort. That's the part to go above and beyond the call of duty. So fortitude will definitely tell us a little bit about that. I'm not just here to work and 4 o'clock I leave, but if there's additional work to do, I'm prepared to do it. I'm committed to the extent that I will go the extra mile in that sense. And the same is true for the last part, in which of a leadership potential, which is called my intent to stay.